Right now, someone in your life is showing you exactly who they are. And you are missing every single sign. Not because you are naive. Not because you are stupid. But because manipulators do not look like manipulators. They look like the most charming person in the room. They look like the partner who loves you intensely. They look like the friend who is always there. They look like the colleague everyone adores. And while you are busy trusting them, they are busy studying you, learning your fears, mapping your needs, finding the exact pressure points that will make you do exactly what they want, exactly when they want it, without you ever realizing what is happening. If you watch this video until the end, you're going to see something you cannot unsee. 7 precise behavioral signals that reveal a manipulator before they have had the chance to finish what they started. 7 signals that your brain is already detecting, but that nobody ever taught you how to read. Subscribe if you want this kind of content regularly. Hit the bell. And let us begin. Most people think a manipulator is obvious. They picture someone aggressive, someone threatening, someone whose intentions are written all over their face. That belief is exactly what makes people vulnerable. The most dangerous manipulators in the world do not look dangerous at all. They look warm. They look generous. They look like the kind of person you have been waiting to meet your entire life. Their greatest weapon is not their cruelty. It is their ability to seem completely safe. But underneath that carefully constructed surface, there are patterns. Precise, repeatable, documentable behavioral patterns that clinical psychology has identified, studied, and confirmed across decades of research on manipulative relationships. These are the patterns your nervous system picks up before your conscious mind catches them. The patterns that explain why something feels slightly off even when everything looks completely fine. And once you learn to read them consciously, they become impossible to ignore. The first signal is the one almost nobody recognizes in the beginning because it presents itself as something beautiful, something flattering, something that makes you feel genuinely special. Psychologists call it love bombing. Here is what it looks like in real life. You meet someone, and almost immediately, this person gives you an unusual and overwhelming amount of attention. They compliment you constantly. They tell you that you are different from everyone else, that nobody has ever understood them the way you do, that you are exactly what they have been looking for. They want to see you all the time. They text at all hours. They talk about a shared future after only a few weeks. On the surface, it looks like passion. It looks like someone who knows what they want and is not afraid to show it. But here is what psychology tells us about this behavior. In a healthy relationship, trust and affection build gradually. They are earned over time through shared experiences, through conflicts navigated together, through the slow and real discovery of who the other person actually is. Emotional intensity follows genuine connection. When intensity arrives before connection, that is not love. That is a strategy. Love bombing creates an emotional debt. Unconsciously, when someone has given you this much attention, this much affection, this much energy, you feel like you owe them something in return. You want to be worthy of what they have given. You want to give back. And this dynamic of emotional debt is precisely what the manipulator establishes before the relationship has even truly begun. There is something else happening neurologically. This early emotional intensity triggers a massive release of dopamine in your brain, the same neurotransmitter involved in every form of addiction. Your brain associates this person with a state of euphoria. And when that euphoria fades, as it always does, you will naturally seek to find it again. Which makes you far more tolerant of the behaviors that come next. The second signal does not live in what the person does. It lives in what you feel after spending time with them. Ask yourself this question honestly. After a conversation with this person, do you feel bigger or smaller? Bigger feels like this. You feel understood. You have energy. You want to move forward, to create, to engage with your life. The conversation fed something real in you. Smaller feels like this. You feel slightly confused. You are second-guessing things you were certain about before the conversation started. You feel guilty without knowing exactly why. You have the sense that you said something wrong even though you cannot identify what. You are tired in a way that has no obvious explanation. This feeling of shrinking is one of the most reliable indicators of a manipulative dynamic. Because people who genuinely care about us, even when they challenge us, even when they tell us difficult truths, leave us with more clarity, not less. Manipulators work in the opposite direction. Every interaction deposits a small additional layer of confusion, a new doubt about yourself, an unexplained fatigue. And over time, this fatigue accumulates into something chronic. A background exhaustion that becomes so normal you stop noticing it is there. The third signal is the one therapists who specialize in toxic relationships hear most consistently from their clients. The conversation that always turns back around on you. You start by expressing something. A feeling, a need, an observation about something that happened. And without understanding exactly how, 10 minutes later you are the one apologizing. You are the one consoling. You are the one reassuring the other person. Your original subject has disappeared. Your needs have disappeared. And the other person is now at the center of the conversation in the position of the one who is suffering, while you manage their emotions. This conversational reversal is a technique manipulators master often without conscious awareness. The moment a conversation threatens to hold them accountable for their behavior, they redirect toward their own suffering, their own difficult past, their own unmet needs. And you, because you are empathetic, you follow. You release your subject to address theirs. Once is nothing. Twice might be coincidence. But if this is a pattern, if every single time you try to talk about something that matters to you the conversation ends centered on the other person, then you have a significant piece of information about what is actually happening in this relationship. Now we move into the second layer of signals. The ones that only appear once the manipulator feels secure in the relationship. Once the bond is strong enough that leaving seems difficult. These signals are more dangerous precisely because by the time you see them, you are already inside. The fourth signal is what psychologists call reality displacement. Here is exactly what it looks like. Something happens. You lived through it. You remember it clearly. And when you bring it up, the other person describes it in a way that is not slightly different from what you experienced. Fundamentally different. They tell you that you said something you never said. Or that you never said something you clearly remember saying. They tell you that you reacted a certain way when you remember the exact opposite. And when you hold your ground, when you maintain your version of events, they look at you with that expression of patient exhaustion, as if they are dealing with someone irrational, and they repeat their version with even more conviction. After enough repetitions of this pattern, something very specific happens inside you. You start to doubt your own memory. You wonder if you imagined it. If you misunderstood. If your brain is somehow playing tricks on you. That is exactly the intended effect. This process is called gaslighting. And its precise objective is to disconnect you from your own perception of reality so that you become dependent on the other person's version of events. Once you no longer trust your own memory, your own perceptions, you are forced to rely on them to know what actually happened, which gives them enormous power over your reality. The clearest sign of gaslighting is this internal phrase that you find yourself repeating more and more often. I am sure that is what happened, but maybe I am wrong. If you recognize that phrase, take it seriously. The fifth signal is the one nobody immediately connects to manipulation because it involves people outside the relationship. You notice gradually that you are seeing your friends less, spending less time with your family, that your personal activities, your passions, your projects have been quietly set aside. Not because anyone explicitly forbade them, but because every time you engage with them, something happens. Maybe the other person expresses a subtle disappointment. Maybe they suddenly need you at exactly that moment. Maybe an argument erupts just before you are about to leave, and you end up canceling to manage the situation. Maybe you come home to a cold atmosphere with no explanation, and you spend the evening trying to figure out what you did wrong. Over time, going out with friends becomes associated with an emotional cost that feels too high. So unconsciously, you start spacing out those outings. Then canceling them. Then not planning them at all. This is progressive isolation. And it is one of the most strategically important stages of manipulation because it removes you from precisely the people who could tell you what they are observing from the outside. The friends who notice you have changed. The family members who think you seem exhausted. The external voices that could name what you can no longer see from the inside. Without those voices, you are alone with a narrative the manipulator is building about who you are, who they are, and what your relationship means. And that narrative, by definition, diminishes you. The sixth signal is the most painful to recognize. Because it involves something you thought was one of your greatest strengths. You have become an expert at managing their emotions. You know exactly what to say to prevent an explosion. You anticipate their reactions before they happen. You adjust your behavior, your tone, your words, even the way you enter a room, based on their mood in any given moment. And you call this sensitivity. You call it attentiveness. You call it love. But here is the reality. In a healthy relationship, you do not walk on eggshells. You do not scan the emotional atmosphere before speaking. You do not calculate every sentence to avoid a reaction. The fact that you have developed these skills of constant emotional surveillance is not a sign that you are a caring partner. It is a sign that you are living in an unpredictable environment and that your brain has adapted to survive in that environment. Therapists call this relational hypervigilance. And it carries an enormous cost on both the mental and physical level. Maintaining this level of constant attention, monitoring the other person's signals permanently to anticipate their reactions, is exhausting. It is the kind of exhaustion that accumulates silently until the day you realize you cannot remember the last time you felt genuinely relaxed in this relationship. These 6 signals together form a complete picture. No single one of them, taken in isolation, proves anything definitive. But if, as you have been reading, several of them resonated with something you are living or have lived, that resonance is itself important information. Your instinct detects things your conscious mind takes time to articulate. And learning to trust it is one of the most powerful acts of self-protection you can take. Now comes the part that matters most. What do you actually do when you recognize these signals? When you identify the first signal, the love bombing, the overwhelming early intensity, the most effective response is not to run immediately. It is to slow down deliberately. To resist the neurological pull of the dopamine rush and ask yourself a simple question. Would this person still be this interested in me if I started saying no to things? That question alone cuts through the performance. When you experience the shrinking feeling after interactions, start tracking it. Not obsessively. Just honestly. Keep a simple mental or written note of how you feel before and after spending time with this person. Over weeks, the pattern will become impossible to deny. When you recognize the conversational reversal, try something that feels uncomfortable in the moment. Hold your subject. Do not follow the redirection. When the conversation shifts to their needs, gently and calmly bring it back. I hear that you are going through something difficult. I want to talk about that with you. But first I need us to finish what I was saying. The reaction to this simple act of holding your ground will tell you everything you need to know. When gaslighting is present, the single most powerful tool available to you is documentation. Write things down. Immediately after significant interactions, note what was said, what happened, what you felt. Not to show the other person. Not to build a case. But to preserve your own reality in a form that cannot be rewritten. Your journal becomes an anchor to what is actually true when the other person works to convince you otherwise. When isolation is happening, the first action is simple. Reach back out. Call the friend you have not seen in months. Show up for your family. Reinvest in your own spaces. Not necessarily to talk about the relationship. Simply to remember who you are outside of it. Because that is precisely what isolation takes from you. Your sense of self that exists beyond the relationship. When hypervigilance has taken over, the question to ask yourself is this. Can I remember the last time I said something in this relationship without calculating how it would land first? If the answer requires serious thought, that answer is already the information you need. Sometimes the responses we have just explored lead somewhere. The other person hears you. Things shift. The dynamic changes. And the relationship becomes something healthier than it was. But sometimes they do not. Sometimes the person on the other side is not able or willing to change. And in those cases, the real question is no longer how do I respond to them. The real question is what place do I want this person to have in my life. That question is difficult. Especially when it involves someone you love deeply. And I am not going to pretend there is a simple universal answer. There is not. But what I can tell you is this. Asking that question, allowing yourself even to ask it, is an act of profound respect for yourself. Because your mental health, your emotional balance, your capacity to be fully present in your own life, all of that has value. A value that no relationship, however significant, should require you to sacrifice entirely. If you have watched this video until this point, you have done something significant. You have chosen to see something that most people spend years refusing to look at directly. That choice matters. Recognizing manipulation does not make you paranoid. It does not mean you close your heart to people. It means you finally have the tools to engage with the world with your eyes open. To choose who deserves your trust consciously rather than surrendering it automatically. You deserve relationships where you do not shrink. Relationships where your emotions are received rather than dismissed. Relationships where your reality is respected rather than rewritten. Relationships where you can exist fully, with your strengths, your vulnerabilities, your needs, without calculating whether any of it is too much. That is not an ideal. That is what you deserve simply because you are human. If this video gave you something real, share it with someone who needs it. There are people in your life right now navigating exactly what we talked about today, without the words to name it. This video might change something for them. Leave a like. Subscribe for more content that goes this deep into human psychology. And tell me in the comments, which of these 6 signals resonated most with you today? I read every single comment. See you in the next one.